I think it's just like in New Mexico where the judge came out with guidelines and perspectives on how to keep children safe that they are going to dictate that Meta has to do. It's not just financial. I think it's directives from the court of law that are going to make Meta change their design platforms. And I think with that being said, there is no way to underestimate the power of being in court, coming up with a verdict, making them pay financially, and that is going to turn the tide for us. This amount, with enough zeros and enough commas, will have an impact.
29 US states have taken Meta to court in a landmark legal trial that's begun this week. Lawyers representing the states have accused the big tech company of covering up internal research showing Instagram was addictive for teenagers. Let's hear now from Schott, whose daughter died by suicide after consuming content on TikTok and Instagram about depression, anxiety and suicide. Laurie, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. And of course, you were involved in a similar trial in California earlier this year because of what happened to your daughter. What was that whole legal process like for you?
I think it was much more emotional than I expected. To be able to sit in that courtroom and listen to Mr. Zuckerberg and Mr. Masario and see the evidence and the internal documents about how they targeted children for profits was just like losing my daughter all over again.
And the outcome of the case financially, it was a win for you. $3 million in compensatory damages that Meta and Google had to pay. Did you feel that was enough financially? I mean, nothing can replace your daughter, clearly, but was that the result you were looking for in court?
I think the outcome was that there was a result in court that favors parents and children, but by all means, it's not enough. Until we make it financially hurt Meta and these big tech companies, will we absolutely see change.
Yeah, and $3 million is just a sort of gnat bite, isn't it, really, in the scheme of things. So I just wonder then, when you hear about the scale of financial consequences that are now being talked about in this current case, the California Attorney General suggesting that potential damages could reach $1.4 trillion. Others have suggested that a figure of $200 billion is more likely. Mm-hmm. Even so, that is, huge compared to what you were seeing in your case. In fact, $200 billion is equivalent to the company's 2025 turnover. So do you think this court case could actually have a really significant financial effect on Meta?
Absolutely. It is the tipping point. And my attorney general is one of the 4 from Colorado that is involved with this case in Oakland. And yes, you take that and add a multiplier across the other AGs across the United States, and it will have a definite pain point for Meta.
And what is the sort of tipping point then? I mean, what effect would you see this having on the operations of Meta and how it has to respond because of this, if it does get hit with this financial consequence?
I think it's just like in New Mexico where the judge came out with guidelines and perspectives on how to keep children safe that they are going to dictate that Meta has to do. It's not just financial. I think it's directives from the court of law that are going to make Meta change their design platforms. And I think with that being said, there is no way to underestimate the power of being in court, coming up with a verdict, making them pay financially, and that is going to turn the tide for us. This amount, with enough zeros and enough commas, will have an impact.
It's interesting as well when you look at what's changed in terms of the public mood since you first started speaking out very courageously, talking about what happened to your daughter. It seems as if there's been a sort of groundswell of public discontent, doesn't it?
Just not in the United States, around the world. We are saying enough, and for parents to absolutely see everything that has been brought forward by the internal documents in a court of law is so much different than us fighting in Washington, D.C. We are on a level playing field when we're in the courts, and that is satisfying to me that we are going to see justice.
I mean, it's brilliant to hear from you about how positive you are about the potential impact in the future, but I wonder what you make of the fact that there's so many tech bosses who are close to the Trump administration. Are you concerned that this current administration, at least, will end up protecting the likes of Meta?
We can only keep fighting. We can only keep telling our message. We can only keep, saying that elected officials that we vote on and put in Washington, D.C., they need to take this into consideration, because we as parents are rising up and as communities and as a nation. So the heat is on. We're going to keep fighting. And I just pray that President Trump and those involved see these outcomes of these court cases and see the information and put a little bit more teeth in legislation and quit taking big tech money.
And it's interesting, there has been some very interesting legislation this side of the pond, and I'm sure you're aware of it, the ban on social media for under 16s. But a lot of people have said, well, that's not the answer. It needs to be the companies themselves that address these issues that the sort of Pandora's box that they've opened. What do you make of that?
I will take anything at this point to keep the conversations going with the parents, but absolutely the design of these platforms has to change. We need to have default settings that they design. These are products. This is like walking into a store and buying your child a toy and handing it to him, and it has all these design features in it that could harm a child. And I say again, social media for parents right now is like putting your child in a car with no seatbelt and no brakes. And we're going to change that, and we're going to keep fighting.
Yeah. Well, as part of your campaign, you met Prince Harry, and obviously we've had the news this week that he and Meghan are returning to the UK. Would you hope that whatever new role he ends up taking on here will follow through on the campaigning he started to participate in on this subject?
Absolutely. I know in his heart that is something that is near and dear to him. And he has helped families, over on your side of the world with this. We have sat with those families like Ellen for Jules Law and things like that. And he has supported us. This is a world issue, and he looks at it in that perspective, and they have never backed down from not supporting us. And they have given so many parents in the United States wings to come up and become advocates for this, because until we were basically able to connect with these parents and form a coalition, I don't think any of this in our stories would have been heard.
So what would you say to Harry as he prepares to make his move over to the UK on this?
We're going to miss him. But what he has done for us and families and children around the world, he will always have a special place in our heart. And I know he has a special place with all of our children.
Well, Laurie, thank you very much for bringing us up to date on that. And, it's good to hear that you do have some hope that things are changing. That was Laurie Schott, whose daughter died by suicide after consuming content on TikTok and Instagram.